So that's about, what, 30 proposed?
Yeah. Well, there's about 15 in the United States. These are in Canada, and these are actually import terminals proposed, which is kind of interesting, but has to do with market stuff. So yeah, these are Canadian, but yeah. So Cove Point is here, and as I mentioned, the export permit was approved this past week, and I'll talk about what that means. And then there's Sabine Pass on the Louisiana coast. And they had their export permit approved last year. So these are the ones that have been approved so far. This would obviously be the Marcellus, parts of the Utica Shale, any shale formations on the East Coast, which a recent USGS survey suggests that there's a lot more recoverable shale gas than was previously estimated. I would imagine, given your pipeline system, that stuff from around here would probably go down to the Gulf Coast if it went out anywhere. Of course, the stuff from Texas. So, just a few facts. I think I've got, okay, yeah. Exports will increase natural gas prices. The proponents of it have said so. They are proud of that fact in their applications to DOE. They have said this is going to increase the price, and that's great because it will increase production. Isn't that wonderful? Aren't we wonderful people? So this was their application that they submitted in 2010. So numbers. So in 2006, the U.S. exported about 700 billion cubic feet a year. 660 or so of that was by pipeline. That last little bit was that terminal up in Alaska I mentioned. So now pipeline exports alone are over double that. Just because they want to get it out there so fast, they're building. They want to do pipelines. They push it through the pipelines, but that can only go so fast. And it can only go so many places. There's no gas pipeline, to Japan that I know of. So currently domestic production is about 23,000 billion cubic feet a year. Actually, that is a little less than we use annually in this country. We use about 24,000. So, and all available, data suggests that we will not make up that difference through energy efficiency and things like that. We'll make it up through more drilling. If all projects currently proposed to the Department of Energy were approved, they would export about 45% of what current production at current levels. So that's and there's all, of course, that will change if the production expands. So 27% increase in domestic production would be caused by that, according to the Sierra Club's analysis, and 93% of it would be fracked gas. That comes to about 6,000 more billion cubic feet per year. A quick review on how all of this works. So the Natural Gas Act has regulated natural gas import and export licensing since the 1930s. And the way it operates, in order to get if you have some gas, some natural gas, and you want to export it somewhere, you need to get authorization from the Department of Energy. And what you do is they will determine whether an export proposal is in the public interest. And from their standpoint, that generally means what the economic effects will be. Now, they are in theory required to look at things like the environmental impact, but we've had a little problem with that, and I'm going to discuss that. So really, the Department of Energy is the one that if they don't do it, it's not going to happen. They approve the concept of the project, and it's by project. And then the Federal Energy Regulatory Agency, or FERC, is responsible for determining how to site and operate the terminal safely. So they will do the review of all the site plans. all of the studies about the site impacts, you know, checking the safety, you know, going over the blueprints and whatnot. The Federal Energy Regulatory, oh wait, that's commission, sorry, not agency. That doesn't calculate, does it? So commission, it's a commission, it's an independent, well, it's independent, but it sort of floats underneath the Department of Energy. But it's one that I've come to learn quite a bit about recently because I'm also involved in helping some people try to do something about a compressor station. And it's, a lot of people don't know what this is. I didn't know what this was before I started getting into this. I never heard of this FERC thing. But it has an enormous amount of power. And, you know, they really can make these decisions that are enormous and very broad-reaching with what I feel is very little input. And it has expanded, it has ballooned in size over the past decade, 2 decades, mainly because of the deregulation of energy markets. So they have a lot more, you know, there's a lot more monkey business going on in the energy markets because they're deregulated, and so they have this, you know, really large enforcement staff. So most of the news alerts I see about FERC are like finding JP Morgan and stuff like that for energy market manipulation. But they are an increasingly, I think they're playing an increasing role in a lot of people's lives that they didn't expect they would ever have to interact with this agency before. And, you know, it's run by commissioners, by appointed commissioners. And so, you know, it's a political, you know, appointment for whatever, you know, good or bad that is, but it really means that it's very hard to influence the decisions of FERC, and they have a lot of guidelines that they follow fairly strictly, except, you know, as far as I'm concerned, when it's in the public interest. So, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, is about 40 years old, and it is probably one of the most powerful environmental statutes that we have. It requires agencies to prepare environmental impact statements for major federal actions. So that would include, or at least the Sierra Club argues that would include, you know, approving Department of Energy approving, you know, exports, and FERC figuring out, you know, whether things are sited appropriately and are safe and whatnot. Unfortunately, what the DOE and what FERC have done, both with the Sabine Pass and with the, you know, the Cove Point decision, is they've said, we can't possibly prepare an EIS. This is all so unsettled. We don't know. It's impossible to figure out cumulative impacts. We can't estimate cumulative impacts of exports in terms of increased production because we don't know what shale play it's going to come from. We can't figure things like this out. This is too complicated for us. Well, they're you know, they're the Department of Energy and the FERC. They've got these really sophisticated modeling tools. And the Department of Energy regularly cites data about increased production in their economic analyses. So, like recently, or you know, sometime back, there was a railroad that would transport coal, and the Surface Transportation Board said, "Oh, we can't do an environmental analysis of this on increased coal production. This is crazy. We can't possibly, you know, it's too complicated." But then they included increased coal production in their environmental analysis. So the way that it operates is the FERC takes the lead on preparing EISs if one is prepared, and then DOE generally accepts what they have to say, but it's not. They don't automatically do it. They are ostensibly required to ensure that all the documentation is adequate for that. And so they really shouldn't be saying, okay, FERC says it's okay, so we, the DOE, say it's okay. But that's what they've been doing. And FERC has been, you know, really falling down. Now they have prepared environmental assessments for a lot of these sites, which is like an EIS light. It's really not, it doesn't give very much data. It's not very robust at all and has a lot less input. So that's kind of where these different organizations, or, you know, alphabet soup falls under. And I'll have something to say about the Natural Gas Act again shortly. Just real quick, a word on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. No. Anyone know what the TPP is, the Trans-Pacific Partnership? All right, great.
Oh, you know,
so-
only like the most ridiculous thing to destroy all the great trade regulations and, you know, carbon regulations that we have globally. It's no big deal.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's horrifying. It is something that's being negotiated right now in ultra super secrecy. The only way we even know even a tiny little bit about what's going on is because some of the articles have been leaked from these negotiations. It includes basically all the countries in the Pacific Rim, and that includes Australia, and then, you know, places like Malaysia, and Japan recently actually entered the negotiations. And remember I mentioned that Japan is really hungry for natural gas. And this is important for fracking for two reasons, one specific and one more general. Under a 1992 modification to the Natural Gas Act, the DOE is required to automatically approve imports and exports to countries with which the United States has free trade agreements. No analysis, no public interest, you know, sort of considerations.
Say that again, that's the status quo now, or under the.
Under a 1992 modification to the Natural Gas Act, the Department of Energy is required to automatically, yes,
And
issue
that's here in the
permits.
States.
Here in the United States. Any permits to import or export natural gas from countries with which we have free trade agreements. So like NAFTA. And this would definitely count. But another thing about the Trans-Pacific Partnership too is that basically if any company that does business at all within the TPP is under the impression that an action taken by a sovereign state is in some way threatening or affecting the expected profits on something, they can sue them in a tribunal, a private tribunal, which
Like a corporate tribunal or something?
Yes, a corporate, well, it's a tribunal of people who would be selected by basically the TPP board, which
Corporate
is
tribunal.
yeah, you got it. And you know, we're already seeing this going on. You know, has anyone heard of the Lonesome Pine Resources case? Yeah. So make sure I get this right. A Texas company is actually engaging in this suing process against the province of Quebec because of their fracking loot. They have a moratorium right now under NAFTA, if I remember properly. So I really, really, really encourage you to go and check out the Sierra Club's information on this. Public Citizen also has some really good resources too. We've done a couple programs with them in Maryland recently, and another scary thing too is that the Obama administration is trying to get legislation pushed through Congress which will enable them to fast track approval of free trade agreements like this. And there's a couple of these on the horizon, including a US-EU trade deal, which is basically the same thing in the other direction. So it's really quite disturbing. It's also mentioned too that these trade negotiations, you know, are considered classified, oddly enough. One member of Congress, whose name escapes me right now, made such a pill of himself that he was finally allowed by the U.S. Trade Representative's office to take a look at the at the articles being discussed, and he had to sit in a room with no communications devices, no computer, no pen, no paper, no aides, no lawyers, and to say that he wouldn't tell anybody about it afterwards. So he basically came out and he said, I'm horrified, but I can't say anything else. And one last thing, the TPP is a docking agreement, which means that if someone wants to join, you don't have to go back to the table and renegotiate. You just go, it's like plug and play. Okay, say China, or somebody like that wants to join in. So, scary stuff.
In which corporations get sovereign status, not just person status.
I would say they would, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And in a way, I mean, I feel like they get a status that's higher than sovereign status, because if a state makes a law, you know, that's how they control corporations. Corporation doesn't like it, they can sue, they can win. There's nothing about government suing corporations for misbehavior. Yeah, so basically they will, they consider it a restraint of trade to have any labeling, environmental regulation, labor, any kind of intellectual property is a huge thing on this. So, and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, which is a big player in this, recently issued a report in which they were critical of a number of countries for their restraint of trade arrangements. Like they said, hey Peru, we don't like it that organizations can't share your citizens' information unless they get signed approval from you. It's a restraint of trade. Hey Japan, we think your labeling requirements are too strict. No. So the Dominion Cove Point LNG terminal, which, as I said, and will continue to say, was the conditional authority for the exports were approved last week. So they're approved to export 0.77 billion cubic feet a day, which works out to about 280 billion cubic feet a year. Quick test, does everybody remember how much the U.S. was exporting in 2006?
683.
About 700.
700.
About 700 billion cubic feet a year. Total natural gas export from the United States every year. So that's pretty disturbing. Cove Point, here you see it. And I have a map pulled up, but I don't feel like messing around getting the Google map going. We have an interesting relationship. The Sierra Club has an interesting relationship with this thing. Back in the 1970s, this piece of land was slated to be a state park, and it was not Dominion. This thing has changed ownership so many times, mainly because it's an albatross as an import terminal. It doesn't make any money whatsoever. Maybe it was Constitution. Anyway.
Constellation.
No, it wasn't Constellation. They're the ones who run the nuclear plant. It's 3 miles up the road that way. So yeah, the Sierra Club and a couple of other organizations said, no, we're not going to let you do this. And after years of legal wrangling, it was agreed that this whole area around here, all this green and pleasant, I don't know why I'm pointing here, you can't see what I'm pointing to, can you? All of this green and pleasant stuff would be what's called the Cove Point Natural Heritage Trust. And it's jointly administered by the Sierra Club, by an organization. It's gone way dormant recently. It's something like the Maryland Conservation Council, that sounds right. And whoever owns that thing. And again, it's changed ownership a number of times. And that the Sierra Club would have to approve any changes, well, as far as we're concerned, would have to approve any changes, major changes to the functioning of this terminal. So when Dominion announced that they were going to do this, first they said we're going to make massive expansions outside the fence line. Sierra Club said no, we're going to sue about that. And then I think Dominion thought about it and they're like, well, it would probably give us less legal standing, so we're going to make all of our alterations inside the fence line. So Sierra Club sued, and around New Year's Day, we got ruled against. And apparently this judge is very rarely overturned on appeal. Basically, he said, the legal agreements that we have do not cover, changing it from an import to an export terminal, which is because it takes a lot of energy in order to prepare things for exports. This is something the Chesapeake Climate Action Network put together. So you can see that by their estimation, this would be the number 4 CO2 emitter in Maryland if it were approved. Mainly because of the liquefaction process. That and the fact that you have to build extra compressor stations to push these extra volumes of gas through. But the liquefaction process, cooling something down to 260 degrees below zero takes a lot of energy. And then there's the ships and everything like that. So I think this is a major change.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the judge of the circuit court down in Calvert County agrees with me.
So do the ships, do they have to have this like cryogenic compressing thing on board their ship running the whole time? For transporting it?
Yeah, basically. They have to make sure that, they basically have to make sure it stays that cold.
Yeah, so that's more, that's even more energy, huh?
Mhm. Yeah, and I will go back on this. There is a nuclear power plant just a little bit up the road that way, about 3 miles or so.
Didn't Calvert Cliffs get some of their licenses like not renewed or?
They had no, they wanted to
Okay.
put in another reactor,
That was
and it didn't go, it didn't fly.
okay.
Um,
I knew there was some like minor victory. I mean, that's not minor, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about it is too, is the local congressman Steny Hoyer is A+100 for this export terminal. He was A+100 for Calvert Cliffs getting their extra reactor too. So it was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of cool that they didn't get it.
Right.
Can I put a footnote on that?
Yes, please.
Offshore wind is what beat it. My organization did the intervention on Calvert Cliffs 3, and Constellation walked, selling their share for $5 after $600 million investment.
Wow.
2 weeks after Google announced that they were putting in the underwater transmission line to bring the offshore wind energy into the same market.
Wow.
Now, big difference between there and here is a more open, competitive energy market, whereas TVA and Southern Company and Duke are all monopolies, so it's not quite the same situation here, but they're 3 cents a kilowatt hour for wind versus 12 on a good day for nuclear. Hey, it's just the same old money talk story.
Pretty awesome. Thank you.
And wind is cheaper than gas, so come on, guys, let's
Yeah.
not get too, it's like, we need some bridging time.
I'm glad you brought up wind. If you don't hear me say something about wind power before I end my presentation, can you remind me?
Sure.
Because there's something I want to mention about that. So the permit has been approved for this. The official application has been filed with FERC to get this done. There've been open houses and things like that. There's ongoing interventions, including by the Sierra Club. So there's a lot of legal wrangling going on, but it's just reading some of the documentation from the applications is fascinating. And in particular, just last week, or about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, FERC issued a letter to Dominion asking them to clarify a few things. Like, what do you explain, please, to us what you were going to do in the case of a fireball? I should also mention too that one of the things that you have to do in order to, or that is done in order to prepare this stuff for exports is the water is removed, the hydrogen sulfide is removed and stored in tanks and supposedly, hopefully done something with the carbon dioxide and then all the BTEX chemicals, benzene, toluene, and so on and so forth. And apparently the FERC was a little concerned that that things were not, or they wanted further analysis on how they would protect against a hydrogen sulfide leak. And hydrogen sulfide is nasty, nasty stuff. So. And here's another thing too, is that it's not just this. It's not just this that is, that is what we're talking about. It's also this. This is this little agglomeration here is the town of Myersville, Maryland. It had 1,626 people as of the last census. It's about halfway between Frederick and Hagerstown on I-70, if that means anything to anyone. So Dominion put in a proposal to have a compressor station where you see all that red business. These lines are a mile in distance, and so you probably can't see it very well, but this is Myersville Elementary School, and this is the fire station and the evacuation shelter, the town hall, and then of course here is I-70. And Dominion claimed that they were doing this, that they wanted this compressor merely to add a little extra energy in the system whereby they pump gas to Baltimore Gas and Electric. But it's 16,000 horsepower. It's way oversized for what they want. And so it's pretty patently obvious that they're doing this in order to add energy in the system to pump gas to Cove Point for export. And what they're doing by not admitting that is illegal. It's called segmentation. And so that's something that we are, that Myersville Citizens for a Rural Community, with a little financial assistance from the Sierra Club, is arguing that this is illegal segmentation. And actually their lawyer prepared a really great legal guide. It's a couple years old, so things change really fast, but it's called How to Protect Your Rights When Interstate Pipelines Come to Town. And I would be happy to download that to anyone, or
I would love to have that on the website and everything,
Yeah, absolutely, cool. And she says you can freely circulate it as long as you attribute it to her. And it's mainly about pipelines, but it's just really good about the federal, process in general. So in order to get their clean air permits, you have to get permits to pollute. From the Maryland Department of the Environment, the way that Maryland government works is, you have to get everything needs to be kosher at the local level. And this area was not zoned for such a thing. And so, Dominion applied for rezoning. And actually, interestingly, the town of Myersville said no. And what's interesting about it is because it's in a rural area, it's in one of the more conservative areas of the state. Nobody really expected, and small towns, and rural areas being what they are, always looking for additional sources of income and taxes and things like that. But they took a look at that, and you can see where it is. It's right there on I-70, and that's already in an ozone non-attainment area. The I-70 is a major interstate, and so they already have terrible air quality right there at that point. So it was really, it was concerning to the town. And I don't know, if people saw the, pictures of when the pipeline in West Virginia, Sissonville, West Virginia, exploded last year and melted the interstate.
No, yeah.
We don't want that happening here. So they said, no, we're not rezoning it. So MDE said, sorry, we can't issue the permits. And so Dominion, in both a classy and classic act, took both the Maryland Department of the Environment and the town of Myersville to court. Recently, we recently got a ruling on this DTI versus MDE. I think they're going to cool it on the Myersville one, is my sense, because it just is so bad looking. It's just such a terrible thing. I think they got sort of what they wanted out of this. Basically what the court ruled is that local zoning requirements are preempted by the Natural Gas Act.
Are you serious?
I'm deadly serious. They said...
This was what level of court?
This was the circuit court. This was the DC Circuit Court.
I'm serious.
What they said is basically you can't hold this up just because what a little local area wants. Now, they also did not say, MDE, you must issue the permits right now. They said that states can still, sort of decide some of their own business. They said you need to start the permitting process. And if something comes up in the course of the permitting process that under your regulations would make you deny this, that's okay. Yes.
So that decision that says that the Natural Gas Act preempts state and local opinion, does that run the gamut for the whole country now that decision has been made? I mean, is that setting a precedent along those times of the lines? Are they trying to open the floodgates for new compressor stations and new terminals and yeah?
As we were going through this, the term precedent setting did come up a lot.
Yeah.
So definitely,
that's brand new.
Definitely preempts zoning, local zoning.
Okay, local.
So
right.
State, we'll see. I mean, the permitting process is going to kick off on Tuesday with an open house. And so we'll go through the whole thing, the whole fun deal that the permitting process normally brings. So
that's really interesting when you associate that with the TPP you were talking about earlier. I mean, that's just.
Did MDE do any air monitoring at that compressor station or near the elementary school or any at all?
No, I don't believe there was any baseline monitoring.
I mean, even after it
They
got...
never built it.
They haven't built.
Oh, they haven't built it yet?
They haven't built it yet.
So they haven't taken baseline monitoring yet?
No.
Are there any community groups that have formed that are interested in trying to conduct baseline?
Yes, the Myersville Citizens for a Rural Community, and I would be so pleased to connect you with them.
Please do. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah. Thank you. They're great people. They're so awesome. This is just like, you know, so I think like a lot of us, you know, we go around and we deal with all this depressing crap all the time, but then we see people's response to it, and it's amazing. And they're amazing people, and so are the people who are fighting fracking out in Western Maryland. So now what? Here's where this comes in again. Cove Point Coalition sign-on letter. As I mentioned at the beginning, and will now mention again, we are kicking off, we're having our official coalition launch.
Sign on.
Yes, ma'am. You did.
Already?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right.
Having our official coalition launch this coming Tuesday at the Public Services Commission in Baltimore, in which, you know, we'll have our presser and everything like that. So this is us in Maryland getting our act together on this.
Yeah.
And I will say that this is a bit late. I mean, we are a bit late in the process.
Better late than never.
Yeah, absolutely. So we welcome any organizations. This is my little tiny URL for our sign-on letter, which is an enormously long URL for a Google Doc. Any organization. We've got businesses. We've got people on the West Coast. Any American organization, because it's within the purview of the letter. We've got faculty and student groups. We've got the Environmental Justice Committee of a research center at SUNY Cortland. So, you know, welcome. Beloved. Appreciate it. So this is really unprecedented. I mean, this is the first time we've really had to deal with this in this country. You know, this humongous infrastructure project with all of these implications, and so I mean, we're just trying a bunch of stuff, to be quite honest. I'm sorry I'm not going to come to you with this, you know, with this fighting an export terminal and winning in a box thing. So I want thoughts, I want ideas, but here's some things that we are sort of working with already. Highlighting existing violations by Dominion. One piece of this Dominion, of this Cove Point project, which they were honest about, is they asked for the power to be able to expand to one or both of two compressor stations, which were in Virginia, one in Loudoun County and one in Fairfax County. And I attended the open houses from the one in Loudoun County. The one in Loudoun County was actually ultimately dropped in the final application because Loudoun County is the richest county in the nation, and everybody who lived around there basically had at least a master's degree, and they got on it with there was, you know, there was a chemist, and there was a public health nurse, and there was, you know, and there was someone who was retired from, you know, one of our vast national security apparatus, and they just piled on this thing. And the local politicians said, we really would rather, you know, build $1 million houses on this than to have you, you know, build a compressor station that could blow up. So, you know, that one, I mean, that was a win, but it was not, I would not call that David and Goliath exactly. But while I was there, you know, and they basically, so someone did an open records request on just what the Dominion had done at the compressor station so far, and it was a litany of violations of, you know, of various kinds of community information, of you know, what they, you know, controlling their emissions and things like that. In particular, compressor stations have blowdowns. Blowdowns are basically when they release everything that's in their system. They do this from time to time for testing and, you know, and cleaning purposes, but also sometimes when something seems to be going wrong, they will often purge the system up, release it all out into the air. And they did this, and they didn't tell anyone until 2 days later that they did this. But it sounded like a jet taking off. So everybody was wondering what the heck was going on. So it was pretty obvious that, you know, but then they didn't hear about it. Also, there was this really great thing about a suspicious package that showed up at the front and was not acted upon for 4 days by Dominion. So already, it just turned out to be like a joke, you know, a prank of some sort. So already Dominion stinks. And I'm working on an open records request for Cove Point. But the people around it, and this is amplifying community voices a bit, they're already saying Dominion is a terrible neighbor. I mean, don't energy companies love that word, neighbor? But they're already being a very bad neighbor. They're loud. The people going in and out of their facility are rude and drive terribly. And somebody approached me at a hearing and said that, you know, he's concerned about, he thinks that he and his wife have some heavy metal poisoning. Don't know about that. I mean, he's the first person who's approached me to say that, so we need to look at that further. But of course, the local business and political elite are all for this. At this same hearing, or rather it was an open house, these people were really drowned out by Chamber of Commerce, by local politicians, by union reps who came down from DC and said this is really needed, and this is a really great thing. So there's people nearby who disagree, and there's actually other people around who haven't showed up yet who disagree. The Chesapeake Climate Action Network took some of their poor, unpaid summer fellows, they call them, and sent them around door to door down there. And got about 200 signatures on a petition, and it was basically a support identifying exercise. And we will have someone, from the area, a waterman, which carries an enormous amount of weight in Maryland. Maryland is enamored of its watermen. Is going to be talking about his opposition to that. So
What's a waterman?
Someone who makes their living off the water, crabbing, sailing, charter boat fishing. Sorry, I forget.
No, yeah, I get it.
We have this perpetual tension between watermen and farmers in the state because of all of the nutrient pollution.
Oh wow.
But we do love our watermen. They're an endangered species because they make their living off of endangered species.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes,
Just a thought.
please.
Has anybody projected 50 years out what the ocean levels are going to be and where this stuff's what's going to happen? You're talking to somebody from Chattanooga, so me and my idea of where stuff is, I mean, there's the ocean and there's land and how high it takes to get somewhere, but how much is going to flood up with the projected ocean levels, and has anybody factored that in at all as to
The location of this?
Yes,
Yeah.
and a lot of the stuff is just,
That is an excellent question.
because I mean,
I certainly haven't.
argue one way or the other, it's happening, will happen, the question is just how much. And so what you see is a lot of long-range planning of business and stuff, or they know it's coming, and stuff has moved out of Florida and has come into East Tennessee because they're projecting out. They're replanting species, reforesting. They're reforesting for the southern pines that like the warmers because they're projecting that this area will be warmer. So their business is thinking that. So when we do our environmental fights against that, you need to factor in that in 2 generations where the water's going to be, and what does that mean?
I imagine someone else surely is thinking about this, but I will ask around the coalition. That's excellent. Did I hear other?
Just a quick thought. We have had some luck in a different fight in North Carolina enlisting the privileged community to help the non-privileged community. And you have to do it gracefully, but it sometimes works to transfer the resource.
Yeah, and I would, hopefully this is something that we will be able to figure out. I agree, absolutely. Particularly since we've got some very privileged people in Maryland, So, anything else? I see another hand.
Well, I was just thinking about all this natural gas. And the export is going to raise the price quite a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So aren't there business, maybe large businesses and people who have a real interest in that price not going up?
Dow
Like
Chemical has come out against exports. So is the National Alliance of Manufacturers.
How about TVA? Probably against it. If they
No,
start-
they're pushing for it. I mean, in the long run.
If they start burning the natural gas, it's the first thing.
Well, they're trying to. Well, that's another.
A lot of, I think also that some of the official organization for local utilities has also stated their opposition to it too. Question is if they'd like to work with us.
Right.
Charles.
I really think it's exciting that you and April get to connect and bring the Bucket Brigade into Maryland and get that work going. The other thing that I was wondering is Mary was supposed to remind you, but she left the room to talk about wind power.
Mhm.
If you want to talk about that now, or are we not at that point yet? I don't want
We
to steer it
are.
away.
Oh, bless you. This is perfect because this goes along with highlighting existing violations by Dominion. Dominion loves to promote its green image. They're so fond of it. And as a matter of fact, I believe either they bid on or have already received. Yeah, they're trying to get permission and a bid in to build offshore wind in Virginia. This burnishes their image. So they are, I think they're very tender in that area of their, desire to promote themselves as, as green.
How far offshore?
It's a good question. I don't know. And I don't even know, I don't know that Virginia has really considered a lot of this stuff yet, like Maryland has. Yeah. They have a foundation where they give out grants to environmental groups, so on and so forth. I really want people to know more about FERC. I mean, this is such a powerful agency. Did you?
Yeah, I have a million questions.
Okay.
But I won't ask them all. Another question I have is Cove Point very close to Virginia? I mean, or is it more like up into Maryland? I didn't see the bigger map, I guess, when you first showed it.
I didn't actually. So yeah, look, a border. All
Okay.
drawn. So
So
yeah.
it's pretty close. Are there groups in Virginia working with you on this very closely?
The Sierra Club, we're starting to talk to the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club.
What about Virginia Organizing Project?
No, I don't believe
Okay.
so.
I'll get in touch with them, or you can just reach out to them either way. They've been really cool. Brian Johns is their guy that's been working on the fracking issue, and so I'm sure he'd love to touch base.
Yeah, because I was talking to someone from the mountains, from Charlottesville, and she says that there's quite a lot of land leased out in Virginia for fracking, and the reason they're holding off is because that it's so icky that it's not worth their while to to try and recover it at this point. But should the price go up, they would be more than pleased to do that. And the people who are working on fracking in western Maryland say that they are really sure that they would have a lot harder going. So yeah, I think getting Virginians enlisted is an excellent idea.
My question is more about the other 15 proposals and what stages they are at, and what's the Sierra Club's kind of overall strategy to preventing those.
I'm not sure where most of them are. I mean, I can't.
Well, that map you showed, most of them were like right in Texas, right?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like in the planning stages, how close are they to approval? And
Right.
I mean, if this one's already been approved, it seems like are there opportunities else?
Yeah, I agree.
And now,
Obviously not for you guys.
yeah, where did you get this information from? I mean, is this all they have public right now? There's no more documentation available or anything?
So, all right. This is from FERC,
Right.
and this is from FERC.
Right.
No, this is from DOE. Excuse me.
Okay.
Gosh, you. I get to do my librarian thing.
Yeah.
So exciting. So this is an extremely user-unfriendly website
Oh, good.
for FERC. It's a lot easier if you know the docket number going in, because if I did a search for Cove Point in here right now, I would get so much crap. And I would get old docket numbers from earlier preliminary filings and things like that.
Gosh.
Cove Point docket number, in case anyone's curious, is CP 13/113. But this is where, this is really the best place. If you don't have someone else working on interpreting the information for you, this is where you go to find out what's going on. Interestingly enough, too, you can also see other organizations' challenges to, because a lot of times, these things are never simple. There will be protests, and things like that. I can't find one. Request of justice. This is our requested intervene. Yeah, so things like that. I'm sure that that comment of West Virginia State Building and Construction Trades is in favor, but I've seen, I mean, in looking through this, I've seen, large organizations, you know, other companies come in mainly over little tiny things like, oh, this messes with our agreement over pricing, or the electrical lines, yada yada. But it's very revealing, and I will come clean to y'all. I went through the initial response to the initial filing, and identified every negative comment submitted by landowners within, or homeowners within on that peninsula down there. And when CCAN sent their fellows down there to knock on doors, I made sure they knocked on those doors. Now, I told them not to tell them, because nobody will ever want to submit a comment again, right? If they find out that, you know, crazy, you know, tree huggers are using them to identify them. But just really interesting, helpful tidbits like that. So as to your question about overarching strategy, I'm afraid not. I don't believe we do have one. And we're going to be having a strategy session. I hope I can go, it depends on whether I'm employed or not, in Astoria, because the people in the Oregon chapter have been really, really good. They're really got their stuff pulled together on this, and I'm hoping to get more, you know, insight in general from them. But yeah, this is where we are definitely in the preliminary strategizing phase. Because it is so, I mean, this is the thing that is so vexing, again, is FERC. It's so hard to intervene with them. And they, my vision for one thing is the commission meets once a month in DC, and I would like to have people there greeting them. You know, every time there was an organization that was spearheaded by the people fighting the Minisink compressor station called We the People Matter. But it's gone a little dormant recently, I think, because the Minisink people are a little demoralized because they, quote unquote, lost. You know, and so the thing is built. But I like the idea. I like the idea because it's this really shadowy government agency that, you know, has a lot of power. Yeah. Fighting infrastructure, you know, stuff like Myersville. Because it would be really hard for them to get this stuff done. There's pipeline issues to be dug into. There's other compressor stations that, you know, are lurking around there, and that's a really good way to starve the beast, I think. And then legal intervention. I know, you know, it's hard if you don't have the resources, but like, you know, your local Sierra Club chapter or whatever, if you're a member of that, poke and prod them and say, you know, make a request to national or something like that, because this is something we need to be in on in the early stages. Yes, Robert.
Oh, what is the projected time frame for this export? I missed your first part, so you might have stated.
I don't think I did. For Cove Point?
Yeah, for it to be up and operational as an export facility.
They told their shareholders it would be online and operational by 2017.
Okay.
Glad you asked that, because it reminds me to tell y'all that all of the gas that would pass through there has already been, well, okay, so Dominion is not going to be selling the gas per se that goes through there. They're going to be offering the facility as a pass-through. But all the two organizations that currently have purchased all the possible capacity for that are Gale in India and Sumitomo in Japan. So, you know, same old, Japan. Also, there was recently a news article. Dominion apparently owns about 100,000 acres of land in West Virginia that they're going to be farming out their Marcellus leases for that. Yep. And it's going to be folded into some sort of master limited partnership. Yes?
Clarify for me one more time, if I understood you correctly, to say that there had been 15 export terminals approved?
No, proposed.
Proposed, but not approved yet in the U.S. Any approved yet?
So the DOE, which has to issue the permit, you know, it's not going to happen if DOE doesn't say so. Sabine Pass in Louisiana, Cheniere Energy, and then Cove Point just this past week.
Are approved. To approve. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The one in Port Charles is already operational, right? Or not yet?
The only, is it solely an export terminal?
that's the item.
Yeah, I don't think it is,
Okay.
but I think it's darn close.
Well, what is the Cove Point FERC number again?
CP 13, as in 2013, dash 113.
So Richelle, have any of the residents of Maryland or other places nearby discussed at this point possibilities for some direct action to come into play on this campaign? And we don't have to talk in any great detail about that, but is that something being considered sooner, or are other strategies hopefully going to take form, and so people are kind of waiting? Or I'm just curious.
The coalition, has floated some ideas that, are within the comfort level of the, the organizations that are members, including, of course, the Sierra Club. Individually, people have approached me and said, I'd totally be willing to whatever, So
Okay.
I'm thinking about it.
Right.
And I know other people are thinking about it. I would like to see what happens with the coalition personally, and see what because they're the ones, particularly since the Chesapeake Climate Action Network is hiring an organizer for this, they're really going to be the ones who are going to have their hands in this at a local level. I would have loved it if it could have been Sierra Club, but it didn't end up that way.
Sure.
But I would like to see how that relationship unfolds, and there are people around the state who are in positions, I think, to engage in actions that would also be.
So the reason that I asked that is because, as all of us in this room already knew or know now, if once this facility is built, then that's going to make natural gas exploration extremely more profitable than it is now. And so I think it's a really good strategic focus for a long-term direct action campaign after, if 6 months to a year from now things aren't panning out in any kind of good way. It seems like a good focus point for the movement against fracking. You keep them from exporting it, huge victory there.
I agree.
So
Completely, yes. Yeah.
Don't forget, 2014 is an election year.
uh-huh.
Know your facts and be a pain in the ass
That's
to
also a good
all
idea.
those politicians.
That's
They
also a
may
good
be
idea.
bought, but we're going to make sure. Tell people that their mineral rights or fracking's coming, and